Good afternoon, everyone. I cordially welcome you all for the fourth lecture of the short course on cultural linkages towards an Asian ideology 2023-2024. Today, our focus lies on the theme of India's role in the Asian community. Our schedule for the day is as follows. We have a 45-minute lecture planned, followed by a brief 5-minute break. After the break, we will resume with another 30 minutes of the lecture. And finally, we will engage in question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce our distinguished guest lecturer, Professor Rahul Raj. Professor Rahul Raj, a lecturer at the Center for Korean Studies, School of Language, Literature and Cultural Studies at the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru University in India. Our esteemed guest received his Bachelor of Arts, Master of Arts, and Master of Philosophy in Korean Studies from the Jawaharlal Nehru University and completed his PhD in Korean Studies at the Hanyang University, Seoul, South Korea. Professor Raj has been awarded numerous awards and scholarships, a few of which are the Korean Government Scholarship, the Outstanding Scholar Award by the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, Government of Republic of Korea, and the Distinguished Scholar Award for outstanding performance in the Y20 on the line of G20 summit. Professor Raj has contributed to the field of peace and conflict studies by conducting various research such as North Korea, time to focus on minimalization, not denuclearization, South Korea, the two moons and the future of a nation, and terminal high altitude area, defense and South Korea, US, China, dynamics moreover. He has contributed his boundless knowledge in various opinion editorial articles such as Ban Ki-moon repeat Kim Dae-jong, Korea's ODA to India, and South Korea India versus North Korea Pakistan. Sir, we are profoundly honored to have you with us here, and we warmly welcome you to deliver this lecture on India's role in the Asian community. Thank you.
Thank you for your for the introduction, introducing me, and also thank you, Professor Hemant, for inviting me, for kindly inviting me to your prestigious university for this lecture. Thank you, and it's good as well as not good. Like good thing is that if I come to Sri Lanka directly, but like the but sometimes the difficulties are there, and also getting a holiday and going to another country is not easy, missing the class here also. So anyway, but still we are able to communicate and successfully conducting the lecture series. Okay, thank you once again, Professor. So today I'm going to talk about India's role in Asian community. And then I will in this lecture I will talk about the historical background as well as the contemporary issues where India has displayed its policy not only in East Asia or also as well as in Southeast Asia, especially during the COVID time and this financial crisis that we will discuss later in our presentation. Yep. So as she has already introduced me, so no need to go through that. And just the thing is that my focus, I am professor in Korean studies and lived in Korea for a long time, delivered a lecture a lot on Korea as well as in East Asia and Southeast Asia. And nowadays I'm also working on South Asian countries, India and South Asian countries. Okay. Now, starting with the lecture, Asia, we can say Asia is the only region in the world with so much diversity, ranging from religion, race, ethnicity, language, to home for for different ideologies as well as different forms of governance. Now you can see Asia is the birthplace of almost all the religions, whether the Abrahamic religions or the natural religions. For Abrahamic religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, natural religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, all this, and also other religions like Parsi, Baha'i, and so many. So Asia is very big, of course, not only in geography, but also in you can see the diversity of religions. Language, you can see like the language is just we cross one country and another country, it's very difficult to find the commonalities, even though some of the language have the same ancestry, whether it is a Sanskrit or whether it is a Chinese, whether it is Arabic, but it's still very, very different. For example, Iran, which has a great civilizational history, Persian language they use, and just crossing its border, and then the Arabic language. Then here, India in itself, it's a very big multilingual country. We cross 100 kilometers and the language change. Even for me, for example, I am from North India. If I go to South India, I have to communicate in English. Unfortunately, I don't know any southern language. And for example, East Asia, if you see like Japanese or Korean, they have their linguistic family roots in with Chinese language, but still very different. Although like Japanese, they use kanji, and the Koreans they use hancha, the Chinese character. It's still very different. So Asia is so much diverse, like language, as I mentioned, religion is another part. Then the forms of government or governance or the ideologies. For example, there are some countries which with monarchy, for example, Saudi Arabia. Then many countries with democracy, India, Sri Lanka, Japan, Korea, other country, or many other countries, Indonesia. Then some countries with communist ideology, for example, Vietnam and or China. Then dictatorial governance also, Myanmar. So you find different forms of government. It's so diverse, like that you find, and everyone has its own set of arguments to defend its or his or her ideology, religion, and so many other things. Now, coming to the race and ethnicity, you will find that starting from if we go with the basic basic observation, the white race, the yellow, the black, the brown. It's such a diverse continent. The significant, and apart from that, it has the history. Is very deep in this. Is it okay? Internet. The history and the civilizational history. China has its own civilizational history. India has its own civilizational history. Persia also has its own civilizational history that you find it, and many countries also have their own claim. For example, for many countries, it's like a myth. For others, it is just like a myth. For them, it is a real story. For example, Japanese, they consider themselves as the incarnation of the sun god, and so many other countries, just like we in India and Sri Lanka, also we have the similar stories. The significance of Asian regional cooperation lies in the fact that it represents an effort to develop Asian solution to Asian problems in a cooperative arrangement. For example, many people say that Europe is much smaller than Asia, and still they cooperate. Of course, they have fought bloody war, bloody world war, and before that also there always there have been had been war, and now they are cooperating. Why not in Asia? That you find. Also, on one side they are right, but the other side is that Asia has its own problem, and its solution lies only in Asia. We don't have to copy the what type of solution that Western countries will keep. We have our own set of chemistry, and we have to see the local situation also. For example, the former president of Singapore, Lee Kuan, he said that of course we are a democracy, but it's a Asian democracy, a democratic country. We don't have to follow that side. What you follow, for you, maybe it is the best. For us, it is the best. So we have to find the Asian solution to the whatever the existing problems. As a means, it is a strategy to raise the regional collective economic status of these countries from the dependence on the developed countries. Because most of the Asian countries, I'm not saying all, but many Asian countries were the victim of colonization, colonialism. Whether unfortunately in Asian continent, Japan was the colonizer, and in the Western countries, of course, many European countries were the colonizer, and many Asian countries were the victim of this colonialism. So, and the kind of grievances was that people think that still they are dictating. So somewhere we have to find the solution of ourselves, and also to depend on our own instead of depending on the developed countries. It doesn't mean that we have to be isolated, just like North Korea. For example, technology. We if they are have developed the technology earlier, so it's not bad to gain the know-how of those technologies. So here, from one of the dependence of the country to that of equal partners with it, thereby enabling developing countries to demonstrate their power. So Asian countries have a huge potential. Huge potential. It's the fact. Only the thing is that we haven't realizing or actualizing the real potential of these countries. It is often said that 21st century would be an Asian century, as no doubt Asian countries have become the growth of global economy. Now, if you see European countries like or Western countries, I'm saying they are already saturated. Where they will develop? They have their own bullet train, the metros, the infrastructure, companies, factories, all these things they have already developed. So there is a kind of saturation. Furthermore, their population is in decline, not going up. In comparison, Asian countries, it's a very young continent, you can say. India in itself, like it's a very young country. Average age is 28 to 30 years. Then Sri Lanka also a very young country, and a lot of area to develop. So huge potential, not only in India and Sri Lanka, but in many other countries in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, for example, Indonesia, Laos, Cambodia, so many, Nepal, so many countries are there where we have forget about saturation. We haven't some of the countries haven't started that type of development. So here the potential of growth is huge compared to the potential of growth in those countries. And that's why when these countries develop, when the market opens, when the companies start moving here and working, then the economy, of course, goes in the upward direction. So Asian countries have become the growth of global economy. India is a very important country in Asia with its size, potential, as well as historical and cultural linkages with almost all countries. You'll be surprised to know that India, as a country, it's a very not only multilingual country, it's a multicultural country. We have this, of course, the dominant religion is Hindus, but there was a time, great time for Buddhism also, and Buddhism still is there. Many Asian countries are Buddhist. The Buddhism is spread from India and to many other countries. Then Islam, India also has a good relation with many Islamic countries. So you will find that India has cultural linkage. It's not only the political or ethnicity or geography. It's the cultural linkages are there. For example, India and Iran, we have civilizational relation. For example, Parsi religion, they actually came from Persia, present Iran, settled in India. Now, who are Parsis? Tata, the famous car company. So they are Parsis, and then so we have even though Parsis you as a community very small number, but with different religions also and different countries, we have a cultural and civilizational relation, and linkages are still there. Even for example, Korea, for I will say, for many people it is a myth. For many, it is a real fact. There is a one Indian princess married to Korean king, and then after that, their kids were called as Kim and Ho. That surname, those surnames Koreans still use. So somewhere the ancestry, the linkage, religious linkages, so many communities are there with India and other countries. Historical linkages, religious linkage, for example, India is the birthplace of several religions, as I mentioned earlier, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, etc. Even Jews, when they were persecuted and they were struggling to find a place around in the whole world, India was the only country they found shelter, and no Jew were persecuted in the 3rd century. So that type of like India always have been like that. The world is whole world. The world is our family, and everyone has a place in India. Of all the religions which originated or nurtured in India, Buddhism became the central pillar for its linkages with several Asian countries. Sri Lanka is one example. Then many Southeast Asian countries and East Asian countries like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand, and of course China, Japan, Korea, Mongolia. All this. So Buddhism became a kind of like connecting link between these countries. With these countries, although Islam didn't originate in India, India has the second largest Muslim population in the world, connecting fine-tuning with the Middle East also. So even though people say that India is a Hindu dominated country, it's not like that. India is a secular country, and India also has good relation with many Middle East countries, even much better than the other Muslim countries. Civilizational relation, India shares common civilization with its neighbor as well as countries which are not bordered, such as Iran and Persia. As I mentioned earlier, like for example, civilizational relation with Persia also. Indians, we eat what we say samosa, common Indian snack, but samosa is not from India actually. It originated from Persia, Iran. All even today, Iranians will say that, oh, we don't know that samosa originated from here. But the fact is, samosa originated from there, and now the globalization of samosa, and now globalization, samosa has become an often we Indians say the authentic Indian food. Or for example, this what is it, tandoori chicken or naan coming from Uzbekistan. So the food connection we can find not in the civilizational relation also. And Korea, as I mentioned already, that the myth, the Indian princess married to a Korean king, and Koreans still use the surnames of their kids. So somewhere the linkages are there. Many countries' language has its roots in Indo-Aryan language, and many trace it to Sanskrit, the oldest written language in the world. So you will find that many Asian countries like have their language connection. For example, Indonesia, many they have this Sanskrit connection also, and even their national airline Garuda. So and very much connected to Sanskrit language. So many Asian countries have these linkages with India. India and the world. During the Cold War era years, India's international relation swung between an idealist posture often associated with countries' first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, and hard-edged pragmatic realism favored by Indira Gandhi. Why? It was because after the independence, Nehru and the leaders during that period of time, they had suspicion on the Western leadership, because especially because we bad experience with the UK in British colonialism, and Britain was aligned with the US. So a kind of like trustship issue was there. So and all, so Nehru and these leaders, they fought for the independence. So they were not very much well versed how the global world politics is going on, and we are very much idealist. The later part, the leaders in India, they became very much realist, and this after seeing how the global politics is going on. Above all, India's international here Asian profile was identified with non-alignment in the Cold War and solidarity with the still colonized or newly decolonized countries, and more broadly with the plight of developing countries. Because India and many other Asian countries, we got independence almost same time, 45, 46, between 45 to 50. 47, 48 there, and many countries were struggling with their own poverty and all these things. They were started to develop, and some of the countries were later decolonized. So we had similar stories. Just in the West, India was often described as too much moralistic and hypocritical. So because India was, although Nehru had this idea of like presenting its leadership, the problem with India was that leadership also required some tangible things, like, for example, economy or the security. India doesn't have, because India was struggling with to provide all these things for its own people. So India rhetoric obscured hard realities from Indian eyes, helping precipitate a traumatic border war with China in 1960, and at times exhausting even India's friend. India realized after when it faced the defeat with China in 1962 and started giving up with this moralistic and idealistic and what you say principles, preaching moral to other developed countries and all these things. Sometimes in international relation, morality is good, but one also has to become very much realistic also. India's enthusiasm for participating in and shaping regional political and security is relatively new. And after that, it was not, India had much experience in that part. After its early disappointments in trying to build Asian unity and solidarity in the 1950s, India political emphasis decisively turned global and multilateral. This the presumed leadership of non-aligned movement gave India stage to articulate its larger aspiration. Of course, during the Nehru premiership, Nehru wanted to make India as a leader of, especially for its region, if not at the global level, and not very successful. But later, when the non-aligned movement arrangement was formed, organization was formed, then India finally presumed its leadership through this NAM movement. Now, NAM was that the countries which got independence after the World War II, and most of the countries were wary of aligning either with Soviet Union or the Western countries led by United States, because the thing was that if they get close to these countries like Western countries, then the Soviet Union will get angry, and India is, or many other developing countries or nascent independent countries were not so much developed and strong to counter this big big powers. So they thought that it's better to be neutral and just focus on their own economy and development. So non-aligned movement was there, and many countries joined this movement. The foreign policy assertiveness of India in the early Cold War years generated deep suspicion in some Western countries quarters that India might emerge as successor of Japan's Asiatic imperialism. Those fears turned out to be exaggerated. So of course, like Asia's, if we say most of the colonial powers were from Europe, but like Asia also had one, Japan, and Japan was during the colonial time in the late early 19th century, actually late 19th century. It was Japan was many countries suffered a lot of hardship during Japanese colonialism, and Japanese had its different goal also. So in their colonial policies. So many countries in the West, many Western countries were worried that India may be the second Japan. Well, it was too much exaggerated and without any fact. The enduring consequence of a subcontinent's partition and the conflict with China over Tibet and the boundary tried down India to dealing with conflicts with its own neighborhood. And the idealistic principle, the Western countries were following that communist and non-communist. China was following this communist policy during the Kennedy time in United States. They wanted to develop India for the next 5 years, and they agreed to give India almost $1 billion per year in order to counter China. But Nehru principle was that no, we don't need to counter China. We are Asian countries. We are brothers. Well, these were moralistic and idealistic ideas. When India faced defeat against China, India in the India-China war, and then it realized that the world politics is not very pragmatic, very idealistic. It should be more pragmatic. But till then, many Western countries who also wanted to be close with India, they were very wary about how India will play its foreign policy. And India was almost involved in its dealing with its conflicts with its own neighborhood. One was China, then the other neighborhood, Pakistan, and and India fought 4 wars with Pakistan. In the end, the world, although India's third world activism meant taking position of on all global issues, these degenerated into mere posturing against one or both superpowers and the inability to come to aid of friendly nations in conflict with their neighbors. Yeah, that was the thing. As I mentioned earlier, if someone wants to become leader, that country also has to present in both, at least in economy and security. India has its own problem. So India was busy in resolving its own issues, and thereby not able to come to aid to friendly nations in conflict with their neighbors. When India took bold decisions, as in Indochina in support of Vietnamese intervention in Cambodia, or criticizing American war in Vietnam, or supporting Sri Lankan government in its fight against LTTE, it put New Delhi at odds with all the great powers as well as back home, other than Soviet Union and ASEAN. So when India criticized United States in the Vietnam War, and when the Vietnam War was taking place, India was struggling with its own food issue, because there was a lot of famine. India was struggling to have food for everyone, and India was importing wheat from US. And the United States used to say that India is struggling to feed its own people, and getting wheat from us, but still it gives moral preachings to us in the Vietnam War. So those type of things always put suspicion in the Western countries. So also, for example, to support Sri Lankan government against its fight against the LTTE, but many regional parties opposed these things in India. And also, so many things were there, not only in the domestic, but as well as outside. India has so many issues. So it was unable to come to the aid of friendly nation in many times. Sometimes it tried, then it struggled. And many countries also, big powers, they got angry also. For one example, I give, when the Korean War was taking place, then the American Secretary of State, John Dulles, when he came to was visiting India, then Nehru said that the first president of South Korea, Syngman Rhee, has to be controlled because he always wanted to have war with North Korea. sorry. When John Dulles went to South Korea and conveyed this message to Syngman Rhee said, India should solve its own problem and don't focus too much here. And he just laughed. So India has its own issues during the 50s and 60s. India's view on regional integration. India is today a member of several regional and sub-regional groupings. As India rises, there is a recognition that for its own interests, it needs to consider the wider regional as well as global interest. Since 90s, we can say that India has changed a lot. It's especially because of upliftment of its economy, and very much connected with the different power groups. No more Cold War period. So India is also very much connected with the Western countries, as well as India has focused on the regional groupings also. South Asia is a region where, despite the existence of Pan-South Asian organization, SAARC, for over a decade, it is yet to implement a single SAARC project. Of course, there are many regional organizations, you can say, for example, European Union, ASEAN, so many organizations, and then SAARC. But SAARC hasn't been very much successful, because one of the issues often comes like India-Pakistan issue often, and that's the one problem. But still, India is trying its best to bring other SAARC countries, even though it has its own challenges with Pakistan. But with other countries, it is trying its best to cooperate. And in 2017, India launched a South Asian satellite, which focused was to help the neighboring countries where these countries are not not strong enough to send its own satellites. So share this satellite with its neighboring countries. India's view on regional integration. And then we will focus on how India's role in South Asia or East Asia or with the Asian community. Multilateralism, India's views on multilateralism, its impact on Indian foreign policy, and India's policy from non-alignment to multi-alignment minus alliance. Historical views of India's multilateralism. India's enthusiasm for participating in and shaping regional political and security arrangements is relatively new. India often avoids this especially security arrangement. It has its own traditional policy, but cooperation is okay, and not very much. It has its own very deep history, so it's a very new thing. But realizing the changing global political scenario, especially in its region, India is showing started showing post-independence, and also it formed that NAM and other organizations like SAARC. After its early disappointments in trying to build Asian unity and solidarity in 1950s, India's political emphasis turned global and multilateral. The presumed leadership of non-aligned movement gave India a stage to articulate its larger aspiration. Historical views of India's multilateralism. Dilemma over multilateralism and liberal institutionalism. Because somewhere India found that these are a type of international liberal internationalism, or the institutions, they are controlled by the big powers. So somehow they will dominate or they will enforce their policies in this, not only on India but many other countries. Then the other part was Kashmir issue and West tilting towards Pakistan, but put India's interest in multilateralism in back burner. India trusted a lot in the United Nations. When India took the Kashmir issue in the United Nations in the belief that they will realize that how Pakistan through its rangers attacked the Kashmir, the Western countries, the veto powers, they didn't side with India, and instead put that we will discuss in the United Nations, and we will look at the matter. So India belief was that they will believe that these Western countries will find the fault and what Pakistan did, but they just ignored it. So and then so West, and then after that, West, especially United States, tilting towards Pakistan. So India's relying on this multilateralism was not enthusiasm with multilateralism was not very successful, and it was put in the back burner. Then the SATO was formed, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and the Central Treaty Organization made watershed in India's virtue to multilateralism. Nehru's romanticism with socialism put India against economic multilateralism, because most of the economic multilateralism happened in the Western countries, and India has its own. Although India was not aligned with Soviet Union, but it followed a socialist policy, which was very opposite to the Western capitalist democratic economy. The inward looking put India marginal to the dynamics of Asia. At the height of Cold War, non-aligned movement, redefining the unequal relationship between North and South under the framework of G77. So there were many countries, and it was not only Asia, I'm saying, because there were many African countries which who joined non-aligned movement, and also the Latin American countries. So they realized that it was with the Western countries, it was a very unequal relationship, and also with Soviet Union. India with other leaders from Yugoslavia, Egypt, Indonesia, they formed this NAM, and the group of like G77. Formation of SARC with socialism as it's defined, so there was no real prospect. Even with the not only the global this NAM, but even the regional and the SARC, most of the countries were the socialist, not a lot of economic movement. So it was like not very successful, because for any multilateral institution is most of them, I'm not saying all, many, most of the multilateral institutions they have started from the economic framework. And economy here, it was almost all countries were socialist, so very less economic movement was there, unlike the Western countries, especially if you see the EU. They started from the coal cooperation, and then how they expanded it. At the height of Cold War, late 90s economic crisis, success of regional organization, supplemented by its economic reforms, made India to rediscover the importance of economic multilateralism. Because at the end of 80s and the early 90s, India faced its own economic crisis. One was that the dismantlement of Soviet Union, which was one indirectly kind of like security as well as economic guarantor to India in many ways. But like Soviet Union was no more there, and it was struggling its own economic issue after the fall of the Soviet Union. So India realized that the success of regional organization is very much important. And then also its own economic reforms. So India started to rediscover the importance of multilateralism, especially economic multilateralism. Recognizing the importance of accessing to the external finance, India launched its look-east policy and gradually became the active partner of ASEAN. So for decades, India was trying to not to get engaged with the Western countries, focused more on with like the socialist countries. Sometimes, of course, it used to get help from the Western countries, but India during that period of time ignored completely Asia, especially how these other countries who got independence at the same time, and they got full economic development in spite of less population with India and other things. So India started to look towards those countries and launched its look-east policy, and gradually became the active member of ASEAN. Firstly, India, with the look-east policy, India looked firstly towards Singapore, and then after that, it expanded to ASEAN plus 3, China, Japan, Korea, and then again plus added Australia and New Zealand. Which then Chinese Kunming initiative in the early 90s and India's cold response due to China's hidden support of insurgencies in Northeast India. It was not only the economic issue that India started looking towards regionalism. India also looked from the security point of view. China was trying to enter in the India's Northeast Asian state, Northeast states, by supporting insurgencies, hidden insurgencies in those regions. And so India realized that there is also a security angle. So it has to again reinitiate its regionalism policies. With China's more overtures, India unveiled a Mekong Ganga initiative, Myanmar, Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Then, sensing the importance of economic cooperation by looking at the success of EU and ASEAN, India began to press for greater economic cooperation within the subcontinent, re-energizing SAARC at the end of the 90s, supporting the idea of FTA in the region, but not much success. Of course, in the 90s, India, again, as I mentioned earlier, refocused on this, re-energizing this multilateral regional institutions. But it was not very much successful. So you can see SAARC countries, like, of course, on paper, it is a very, the organization is very much existing, but how much successful that one has to see again, compare, and when, especially when it is compared to ASEAN or EU. FTA also not very successful and not in the region. So for India, ASEAN became the principal vehicle for Asia, a guiding principle for India, and for Asia also a vehicle for Asia's regionalism. Liberalization and rise of its economy gave a new thrust to its own economy, and also its importance, with which resulted in signing of FTAs and Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, CEPA, with ASEAN countries. CEPA is just like FTA. Now, in the late 90s, India started signing many FTAs with other countries, and to get close with these regional organizations, and also the countries who are participating member of this regional organization, expanded the ambit of lookist geographically and politically. Japan, as I mentioned earlier, it was firstly focused on ASEAN, then started China, Japan, Korea. But China had India has many challenges with China in spite of economic cooperation in many sectors. India started expanding more and included Australia and New Zealand. With the change of world dynamics in the post-90s, multilateralism and regional security cooperation re-emerged at the top of India's foreign policy. So India started looking towards, in the 50s, India started towards regionalism and multilateralism, not very successful. Then after the China's war and the war with Pakistan, then again, and then a west tilt toward Pakistan. So multilateralism was put in the back burner. Again, the change of world politics, world dynamics in the post-90s, and India's more security as well as economic interest in this regional organization. So regional security cooperation emerged at the top of this India's foreign policy. Not to be left behind, India vigorously started its campaign with and with covert support of Japan and strong support from Indonesia, Vietnam, Singapore. ASEAN invited India in the first East Asia Summit, even though China strongly opposed it, because China was not very much happy in the East Asia Summit. But ASEAN said that because even China is not a member of ASEAN, we have expanded it to ASEAN plus 3. It doesn't mean that China is part. So, and Indonesia strongly supported India's case. And in the added 3 countries, China, Japan, Korea, South Korea and Japan also supported India. And finally, India was invited to East Asia Summit, and thereby became the regular participant of these regional meetings. Debates on regionalism. Why India was very sometimes love and hate relationship. Sometimes it went with it. Sometimes it just put it in the back burner. The ideas of formation of Asian bloc in the post-decolonization with different views, supplemented with suspicion. especially fear of neo-colonialism. Independent, because during when the India was under British rule, so Viceroy Lord Curzon's view was that independent India must remain at the center of any Western strategy of securing Asia. So through India, we can control Asia. India was not okay with this type of ideas. One thing was that they are looking India from a new colonial point of view, and through India, they are looking other countries also in that thinking process. Emergence of Indian realist school rejecting the pacifist views and focusing on India's security. Multilateral approach in the form of regional council to underwrite security, Panikkar said. Then India-China love-hate relations under the smog of Tibet issue, and finally to cope with the new situation by policy of simultaneous engagement and containment due to border issue. A new chapter in India's foreign policy with the starting of strategic relations with Moscow and implicitly supporting Vietnam and Cambodia. So why it was that India in the 50s was very much against joining any bloc, Soviet Union or United States. In the foreign policy, often it is said that bad, and not only foreign policy, in human's life also, bad experience demands change, good support sustain. So India had such a very idealistic view, especially under Nehru, towards China, that in India and China, we are brothers. But in the 1962 war, India learned a lesson. And then after that, after the India-Pakistan war, and which led to the independence of Bangladesh in 1971, India signed a treaty with Moscow, Soviet Union, a friendship treaty. So it was a kind of like India started looking its foreign from the strategic, started building its strategic relationship with many countries, and Moscow was one of them. Transforming from the idea of leading to idea of emulating. Economy, India's 90s economy crisis, as I mentioned. Then after the 90s, India started looking more towards the regional organizations, changing the shape of socialist mixed protected economy to capitalist mixed protected economy. Because even India on verbally, India said that India is looking towards that. India also changed its policy because it realized that socialist economy hasn't been successful for India, and it also needs investment. So it has to be kind of like capitalist mixed protected economy, where it invited foreign companies to come to India and start invest, and thereby which helped actually India in its economy. Being one of the founding members of NAM, Non-Aligned Movement, which was at the core of its foreign policy till the 80s and is still there, though it is losing its shine, India was strongly against any alliance and more against the United States, because India viewed US policy many times with suspicion, especially its own experience during the 1971 India-Pakistan war, where when Bangladesh got the independence and the US was supporting Pakistan. Why NAM? Why Non-Aligned Movement? Because India wanted to have to maintain its own autonomy. One good side or bad side, say that Non-Aligned Movement, India has its own benefits. Good side, for example, many aligned countries like, for example, Japan and Korea, they are aligned with the United States. Of course, they got a lot of benefit. Bad side is that many times they have to follow the US dictates also. So because if there is, for example, Iraq's second war, South Koreans didn't want to participate in the Iraq second war, but because of American pressure, South Korea had to send its troops to Iraq in this second Gulf War. So alliance has its own pros and cons, and as well as NAM, because you are not aligned with any country, so getting benefit or getting help from many developed countries is not so easy also. Why opposed to US? As I mentioned earlier, because US alliance included India's adversary Pakistan. So NAM was a code word for for independent foreign policy. Unfolding structural changes in the world politics and Asian balance of power. India US came close at the starting of 21st century when President George Bush and Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, they signed a framework agreement, especially during the tsunami, And however, both were not in favor of at that time antagonizing China. Nevertheless, find deeper bilateral security cooperation. That is containment of China. They realized that at the moment we don't want to antagonize China, but maybe we have our common challenge in China. Two propositions of this relationship can be taken from Indian perspective to emerge as an indispensable element in Asian balance of power, given its history and location. And second, strategically, cooperation with the US might immensely strengthen India's future options. India with South Asian countries. The term South Asia is very recent origin. It came into use in mid 1960s. South Asia basically described this physically and culturally contiguous countries: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Now, India towards East. India has taken a deeper interest in East Asia over the last decade as it tries to define its new global role. Although India's engagement with East Asia dates back to thousands of years, like for example, Buddhism is there when Buddhists travel from India to China to South Korea and Japan, or the mythical story or the real story for some people that's the marital relation between India and Korea or many other countries. All much of the development, but these apart from these, or India Nobel Prize winner Tagore, who was very much wary of the Western colonial power, and because he realized that how the colonialism is what colonial powers are doing, not only in India and other countries. So many commonalities or linkages were there, but not these were all what we say intangible, but experience and the culture. But tangible things that like much of the development in the realm of business and strategic relations developed in the post-90s to project itself as a regional power when it opened its market and launched its lookist policy. Under this policy, it initiated forging several economic and commercial ties and also enhanced security partnership with like-minded countries who are concerned with the increasing influence of China in the region. In the early years, the lookist policy was primarily focused on ASEAN. However, India steadily expanded its geographic domain of its policy to include Korea, Japan, China, and Australia. India's foreign policy interest in South Asia. When the Modi administration, when it came to power, it launched its neighborhood first policy to improve trust and cooperative relationship with neighboring countries. Prime Minister Modi invited all the heads of SAARC members to his swearing-in ceremony in 2014. In fact, former Prime Minister of Japan Shinzo Abe and Indian Prime Minister Modi, they had a very good friendship even before when Prime Minister when Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister. So when he became the Prime Minister, Japanese Prime Minister was expecting that Modi will take the first foreign visit to Japan. But India realized that firstly, it has to take care of its own neighbors and neighborhood policies should be there. So Modi firstly went to Bhutan instead of any other country. Of course, Japan is very much important for India in its many strategic economy or the security point of view. But India also realized that if the country should focus more firstly on the neighborhood, and then of course then the strategic partnership with other countries. Then India also realized that a big country in this region has to play a role of big brother to avoid the Chinese debt trap diplomacy towards SAARC countries. And unfortunately, that took place not only in SAARC countries, many other countries. Those countries who took loan from China and now realizing how troublesome those Chinese loan is. It's kind of their debt trap. It has already displayed its responsibility during the COVID crisis as well as financial crisis in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka under the debt trap of China and a bankrupt economy with no food, fuel, or basic amenities going through the worst economic crisis, even when China didn't come to rescue, the Indian government gave a helping hand of $2.5 billion with credit facilities for food and fuel. India also sent vaccines to India, launched its vaccine diplomacy. Now, China also launched its vaccine, but Chinese vaccine was not very successful. India is also the biggest manufacturer of generic medicine. So AstraZeneca vaccine, although developed in UK, but more than 70% of its vaccines were manufactured in India. India also has its own vaccine which developed and which was very much successful. Now the recent papers are coming, even was much more successful than Pfizer. So India sent vaccine to many countries free of cost. Like India sent AstraZeneca vaccines to Sri Lanka. It also gave 1.2 million free vaccines to Bangladesh. It also gave, even when US troops left Afghanistan and Taliban took over, India realized that the poor people should not suffer, and it gave 500,000, that means 5 lakhs of vaccine doses to Afghanistan free of cost, so that because it has to help the humanity, even though India doesn't agree with the form of government which Afghanistan has. Since last decade, security has become a major part of India's low-cost policy, wherein it included a bilateral security defense cooperation arrangement with Singapore in 2003, making the first substantive and explicit security agreement in the region. Later, it also started a wide range of military cooperation and military exercises with a number of countries in the region. As the power balance is moving from the Western Hemisphere to Asia-Pacific region, wherein the rise of China and the US pivot to Asia, especially this policy came during the Obama time, have become a central piece of debate in the foreign policy of several countries. New Delhi also has crafted its policy to stay abreast of the rapid development in the region. India, which launched its lookist policy in the 90s, under the Modi administration, it changed to actist. It recrafted its, in 2014, India recrafted the lookist policy to actist, wherein it has sought to actively engage the Asian partners, both from economic as well as security perspective. Sorry. The rise of China and its assertive behavior has posed a new challenge to the whole world and Asia in particular. China has border dispute with almost every country, starting from India to Bhutan, Southeast Asian countries such as Vietnam, the Philippines, to Korea and Japan. Many of the countries in Asia-Pacific region share New Delhi's concern about China's growing assertiveness, including ASEAN countries. One of the best example was that the recently concluded APEC summit, where for the first time, APEC's 25-year history, leaders failed to agree on communique. Because many countries were of the view that what the China is saying, that it should be included in the final press conference report. But China is also supporting Cambodia, and the Cambodia and other Malaysia, they opposed it, and finally, then the first time leaders failed to have this agreement. Now, India with its with Asian countries, what are the common things? Common interest, economy. We can say blessing in disguise when President Trump administration came in power. Former US President protectionist policies, China's belligerent behavior have hurt India and other countries in Asia. Also, the present president, US President Biden, has also taken a strong position against China due to its aggressive behavior both in economy and security. In fact, Biden administration is taking more pro-India and pro-Indo-Pacific, actually, policy in order to counter China. Therefore, it is time for India and other Asian countries to adopt the changing reality and establish a win-win strategy for both India and other Asian countries by strengthening economic relations between India and Asian countries. Now, China factored in India's act as a strategy. If we see, China's one belt, one road is now viewed as debt trap diplomacy, and many countries are going against it. Why is it so? Because China actually economy, it is a kind of like economic inducement, often used as to buy influence. Also, China invests in those part of the country when it is going to help in the other countries, where the return is very negligible or zero. So if the country like China invest $1 billion, and the country is unable to pay, and then China asks that okay, we will manage this part of area for the next 99 years. And that's a kind of like Chinese debt trap diplomacy. Most of the investments are like that in many countries. Recent electoral results in Malaysia and Maldives have shown that people are against Chinese debt trap investments. And many nowadays, not only Asia, many African countries are also realizing, because when the Chinese one belt, one road, this economic uh, uh, projects are going on, China also brings their own labor in street, so it is not creating job for the locals also. So that is, and then their bank their loan is also at a very high interest rate. So kind of like debt trap strategy. So instead of that, India or other countries, they focus on MRM, MR2 OBA, one belt, one road. Many belts, many roads is better to China's one belt, one road, which is often working as problematic for many countries in the region and beyond. India, along with Japan, has launched Asia-Africa corridor because India has its own economic limitations. Japan has its own limitations to reach to African countries. India and Africa and many Asian countries, they have India has its connection with many African countries because of its common experience of colonialism. So India, along with Japan money, of course, India is also contributing, but Japan is contributing more, and then Asia Africa corridor. So to counter, so that these and the country poor countries do not fall in the Chinese debt trap policy. Then Asia Africa growth corridor is a plan to create free and open Indo-Pacific region by focusing on ancient sea routes, creating new sea corridors that will link the African continent with India and countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia. Then the project stakeholders hope the sea corridors will be low cost and have less carbon footprint when compared to land corridor. Moreover, India has recently tried to galvanize its relation with ASEAN neighbors by trying to shade out differences over each other's expectations and disillusionment. India's economic focus too is not in tune with other regional powers, which view ASEAN as an important market for their exports and investment. India also has changed a lot of policies recently during the just concluded G20 summit in India, in Delhi. India again with other countries, Middle East countries, I'm saying, they have launched another corridor which will help the products to export from many other countries via India to Dubai, and to finally to European market instead of going through China. So India is now working more on regional framework, not only in ASEAN with ASEAN or SAARC, or also forming new regional or connections. India helped two neighbors since January 22. When India economic crisis began, India has extended almost billions of dollars to Sri Lanka. India currency swaps, credit lines of strength for essentials, and loan deliberate have kept Sri Lanka afloat. Then New Delhi has helped Sri Lanka defer payment of loans totaling $1 billion under Asian Clearing Union. India has also assured Sri Lanka that it will supply 65,000 metric tons of urea. Sri Lanka's disastrous implementation of an organic agriculture drive and had left the country on the brink of agriculture crisis. The first batch of humanitarian aid was dispatched to its neighboring countries, including Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Afghanistan, and Seychelles, Mauritius. India has always been a first responder to any crisis in the region and has always extended a helping hand. India, as I mentioned earlier, India delivered 500,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccine and 1.6 tons of medical aid to Kabul through WHO. It has pledged to supply more medicine and food grains in coming weeks. New Delhi has also pledged to send 50,000 wheats to Afghanistan. Even though India doesn't agree with the form of government, there is still India believes that humanity should be taken care of, and that's why India sent its aid to Afghanistan. As there are common interests of mutual benefits as well as common concerns owing to the rise of assertive China, both India and Asian countries have to work together and form a long-term perspective. Although earlier interest of India was mostly confined to its regional influence, it has started to look beyond it not only to express its growing stature but also to counter China's influence in the region. India needs to make a deeper commitment to Asian countries. Of course, and not only in terms of verbal, but also in terms of economy, so that the smaller countries don't fall in the trap of China. India is not seen as threat, unlike China, which is viewed with anxiety by many countries. However, own economic and strategic profile in the region in order to become a viable option of trade of mutual benefit compared to China, which dominate in exports with Asian countries. So India has also to increase its own economic and strategic profile. India needs to focus on more effective delivery of projects. It is already committed to in order to get support from Asian countries. Of course, China is building very rapidly many projects in Asian countries. India also has to counter it, if they are committing to many Asian countries, because the many countries will not wait for for an infinite time. Also, both India and many Asian countries have, although we have a kind of a lot of intangible linkages, like culture, Buddhist linkages, cultural, religion, so many things like linguistic linkages. Both India and many Asian countries have historical and cultural linkages. Hence, both need to reinvigorate those bonding. India should offer a scholarship to Asian students to premium engineering, medical, and management institutions in order to boost people-to-people contact. Already, India is giving a lot of a scholarship, but also more people-to-people contact will work more in the benefit not only for India but for the other countries. Because in the era of globalization, people are not only waiting for the traditional friendly or neighbor countries. Because students and people can go very far also. Even, for example, I have seen many Asian countries, they are working as far as Korea. Forget Middle East countries, Korea and Japan, they are working as migrant workers also. So these days, distance has become the issue of the past. People are going, and so India also has to provide opportunities, both in the terms of study as well as job opportunities. Okay, so it will be a win-win solution for India and Asian countries, as India has displayed its role in the during the COVID time, then in the financial crisis of many countries. India also has to further enhance its profile in other areas, in order so that other countries don't fall in trap of China, as well as India's commitment to Asia and its goal for the Asian cooperation. India and Asian countries can have a special role to play in reconciling, fusing, and amalgamating these different processes. Thus, they stand between China on one side and US on the other side geopolitically. They have deep cultural and economic and diplomatic links to both. They do not threaten each other. India is not regarded as a threat to Asian countries, and they are no threat to India also, because we never had any what do you say this political or geography or any other, and still we don't have any issue with that also. unlike China with other countries. In this sense, they form what the political scientists called Deutsch referred to as a security community, a relationship in which there is no fear of war. This security community could be a force for greater Asian integration in the years and decades ahead. India believes in Vasudev Kutumbakam, a Sanskrit phrase from Upanishad, which means the world is one family. So it's not like you and my or me. It's like we are one family. That's what like Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, when he was asked about a question about that's the India is run by nationalist government, then he countered that if we are a nationalist government, then what about the countries which are which restricted the COVID vaccine during the COVID crisis? They said that firstly our people, and then we will think about others. So firstly we have to vaccinate our people, then we will give the unlike Western countries. India said while we will Indian Foreign Minister said while we will vaccinate our own people, but at the same time we will also vaccinate people from other countries also, because we consider the people of other countries as our family members. So it is not then who are nationalist, if we are nationalist or we are internationalist. So India's view is that your problem is also our problem. It's like, because if we cooperate, then that is the meaning of Asian cooperation. Okay, thank you.
Professor, thank you very much. I think that our students may be having some questions, comments. Students, do you have any questions, comments, or ask anything from Professor Rahul Raj?
Good evening, Professor.
Yeah.
The South Asian societies, including Sri Lanka and India, are highly bounded societies. But today, the Supreme Court of India ordered the government to allow the gay marriages. That is a big win term of the world going forward. But will South Asian society, which is heavily influenced by culture, accept it? What is your opinion about it?
So these are already, things are changing on that part, and we have to consider our local culture also. We have to keep local culture also in mind. Of course, culture is an ever evolving process, and it is not a it cannot be accepted in a day or two, today or tomorrow. So the thing is that Supreme Court has given the judgment, and that they said that if I am actually, I haven't gone through the news, but so the same-sex marriage in India, actually, many people are still not very ready. As I mentioned earlier about the Singapore leader Lee Kuan, we are a democratic country. Western countries are also democratic country, but each country has its own chemistry, and it is not necessary what you follow today, tomorrow we will follow. We will change according to our own understanding, and we will take our own time. For example, gay, one aspect is, of course, they are also human being, but there are also counter arguments also, for especially the taking care of child, also adoption of children by the gay people. So people are not very much in India as not very much ready to accept these things, and many Asian countries also. So the thing is that very sensitive, and we as the society evolves, we will take it. For example, India earlier. Recently, India has passed a women reservation bill in the parliament. Now, when India got independence, there was no reservation for women. Now, 50% of the society is almost women, and their number in the parliament is very 30, 40, or 50. So, out of 545 members, there should be at least 200 members from the women community. But it took time for India and the civil society, the Indian political leaders. Finally, they realized that there should be the right should be given to them, and finally they come and they pass the judgment. So, and also everything we cannot say from how the society, from the religious point of view, the cultural point of view, we also have to understand. So I believe that it will take time, and it will over the years it will develop. It's not necessary that what the West is doing they have done, so we have to follow it.
Thank you, Professor.
Students, any other questions? Any other comments? Professor, we are happy to hear that
Good evening, sir.
Indian
I have
economy is,
I have a question.
Mhm.
How has India's foreign policy evolved to enhance its role in the Asian region?
Mhm. Okay. See, especially if you see from the Nehru time period, India has changed a lot in the sense that we had non-aligned movement, and still it is in working, though its profile has become very low. But the thing is that India now is following from non-aligned movement to multi-aligned movement. We are not very to connect. We want to have the connection with all the countries, whether it is Soviet Union or now Russia, or whether it is with United States. And India's foreign policy is being made taking care of its own Indian interest too. For example, I give you Russia-Ukraine crisis. Now, many countries, the Western countries especially, they are very much against Russia.
I know.
The very much against Russia. Now, Russia and India, we have traditional relationship, traditional friendship. When India was in trouble, Russia helped. So that type of relationship is not easy for India to give up Russia. Second thing is that when the Western countries are also not very much honest. On one side, they are saying that we put the sanction on Russia, on the oil. And on other side, they are buying oil, Russian oil, not directly, indirectly. India is buying oil from Russia. India is refining that Russian oil, and Western countries European countries are buying. So how much India is honest? European countries are honest. So India is foreign policy. If you say it is not going, it is not listening any Western countries' advice or preachings. It is taking care of its own national interest, then the regional interest. Example is that another example. India is part of Quad, that US, India, Japan, and Australia. Last year, one Korean student asked me this question. India is part of Quad. So what is India's view on Myanmar military dictatorship? And I said, like, it is human rights and all these things. And I said, of course, US, Japan, and Australia, they are very much against this dictatorship, and India is not saying, because India also has to consider its own neighborhood interest also. It's saying that India is not very much happy with the military dictatorship. But the thing is that if India supports just like and go with US, Australia, and Japan, then Myanmar will be go against India. China will come. So these countries will not be affected geographically. Australia, Japan, and United States. India will be affected geographically. So India considers that firstly, it's in the foreign policy profile, its own interest, not going to listen to foreign countries, and then its regional interest, and according to the permutation and combination, it will formulate its policies. And last, in the other part, foreign policy, for example, India and Korea, we have this FTA. Now, Korea, SEPA that we say, Korea is trying to have this upgradation of SEPA. India is still not very much ready because we are still talking for the last 9 years. The thing is that recently, Indian's Commerce Minister said that Korean companies can buy steel from Indian companies also, but while making cars in India, but they are buying even steel from Korean companies. So it is not benefiting India. So that's why we are not still India is hesitating about this SEPA and other things. Of course, discussion and talks are going on. So when we say about the global profile, India has recently hosted a G20 summit and successfully agreement happened on Russia-Ukraine crisis, war crisis, and all these things. So India has India's profile in the foreign policy, in the global politics has changed a lot, and people are expecting a lot, especially in the Modi administration, to deliver and sometimes work as a mediator in the crisis, in the time of crisis in many regions. Okay.
Sir, I would love to raise another question.
Yeah.
What are the opportunities and challenges for India as it seeks to expand its influence in the Asian community?
Well, challenges, the most important challenge is economic part. The thing is that one thing, as I mentioned about that, China is delivering very fast, very rapidly, especially if you take, for example, infrastructure part. The process there counts is the loan come at a very higher interest, even more than the World Bank interest. And the terms and conditions are very tough. In that part, but the process, China completes the project very much in time. India, like many other Southeast Asian countries, we hardly come deliver many things in time. Of course, India has changed a lot, but it has to deliver what it says. So for example, if we are making a project in Sri Lanka or in Nepal or any country we will finish by 2025, it hardly happens. Sometimes it happens even 26, 27. So this time, then the financial constraints, for example, China comes with huge money. People see the money, people don't see the interest. India comes with money, but like it has its own limitations because it has its own huge population is there. Other part, in terms of that, India has its limitations and also opportunities for the other countries also to realize that, of course, we went with China, we have our own bad experience also. So those things are there. In fact, recently Bangladesh realized that they didn't allow some Chinese company in one sector. I am forgetting that part, and they realized that no, it's not beneficial. So there are opportunities. It's a win-win situation for India and with many other countries. But there are limitations also. And the security aspect, if you say India will still, although India is part of Quad, it is not an official military alliance. It is, people say, we are trying to cooperate Indo-Pacific in the Indo-Pacific region. Focused is China, but India will try to avoid any military alliance with any country and any confrontation openly with any other country. So even though it has its own challenges with China, India believes that it will solve its own problem. Because joining any military alliance or any, it is not beneficial for India also. For the short term, it may get benefit from other countries, especially the big powers. Long term, it's not so easy because in international relation, you can change your friends, but you cannot change your neighbors. So we have to live with the neighborhood also, whether we like it or not.
Thank you so much for your insightful answer, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Students, if you have any more questions, please send those questions to our common email address. Then I can forward the questions to Professor Raj and his comments. Professor Raj, thank you very much. I think one of our student is there to give the word of thank.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again for inviting me.
Please wait. One of our student is going to deliver the
Okay.
word of thank. Right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to extend my gratitude through this vote of thanks on behalf of all the students participating in the short course of cultural linkage towards an Asian ideology for the academic year 2023-2024. First and foremost, I would like to express a heartfelt appreciation to our esteemed lecturer, Professor Rahul Raj, for generously sharing his time and invaluable knowledge with us today. Sir, your contribution to this course is a true blessing and we are profoundly grateful. I would also like to extend our thanks to Dr. Hemantha Premaratna and the team of the staff at the Department of Social Sciences in KDU who work together to bring these enlightening lectures together. Last but certainly not least, I extend our appreciation to all the participants from our university who joined us for this event. Your active engagement has not only made this lecture a resounding success, but also provided you with valuable insights into the topic of India's role in the Asian community. In conclusion, I wish to express our deep gratitude to Professor Rahul Raj for his unwavering commitment, as this marks his fourth consecutive year contributing to our course. Sir, it is a distinct honor to us to have you among the stars. And we deeply appreciate the time and the effort you have invested in enriching our educational experience.